Hello and welcome to a Tabletop Ramblings tournament review. It's the Scouring of Stirling coming up in the next couple of days, although when this video comes out it will have already been. And it's a good versus evil 800 point tournament. So these are the lists that I'm going to be taking with me. It's the GBHL final. So it's going to be a really big event. Lots of people. And that's up in Stirling in Scotland. It'll be my first time going to Scouring of Stirling. It's been running for, I think, 8 years. It's quite a well-established event. So it'll be good to go and see what's going to happen. And one of the biggest things with this tournament that I've not experienced before is that it is a good versus evil setup. What this means is that you take a good and an evil army, and then there'll be some method of choosing which force gets used. Not quite sure how that's going to happen yet. We'll find out, and I'll let you know when we get there. But your good force will play against evil, and the evil force will play against good, for quite a thematic tournament. It's a very heavily converted force. Again, you may have seen the force already, but there are a few new additions. There's Little Red Riding Hood. There's she's just that's a shield, the bag of apples. There's also Merida kicking about. There's quite a lot converted from Warriors of Rohan. There's that's Boromir, I believe. There's all sorts of different ones. The one in pink there, that lady there, she is a Harad warrior. There's Númenóreans, all sorts in there. It's quite a fun list, even when it loses, because there's a lot of different little bits and bobs in there. My evil list is led by the Witch King. He is 3/18/3 on a fell beast with the crown, as he normally is. Although often he's 16 will when I take him, but this time he's that little bit stronger. He is leading 5 Black Númenóreans, 5 Morannons with spear and shield. He's got a tracker and a banner Númenórean. And then Gorbag and Grishnak have identical warbands. They both have a a Warg Rider with a shield and throwing spear, and then 6 Morannons with spear and 5 Black Númenóreans. They're 2 identical warbands. So that's Grishnak with shield and Gorbag with shield. And then the Mouth of Sauron has 4 trackers and a Warg Rider with shield. And that's 800 points. It's very similar, although slightly tweaked on a list that did fairly well at an event earlier this year down in Birmingham. It managed to come 4th out of I think about 40 odd people, so it's an okay list. Quite happy with it. It's been tweaked slightly since then, so hoping to at least be able to hold its own against the enemy. So they are the 2 armies. Going to need to box those up somehow and find a way to transport twice as many models as normal to an event. Having arrived at the venue, I had a quick look at some of the boards. There's some really nice looking boards. There's a couple of photos being flashed through here. I got there relatively late on the morning because I was staying quite a way away with in-laws, so didn't manage to get photos of every board before it got a bit too busy. But as you can see, there's some nice boards and some nice terrain. This desert board that's up now was the board that I played on for game 1, where we were playing a modified version of Heirlooms of Ages Past. The one with the 6 objective markers, but only 1 is the correct one. It was modified because there was 1 less point for having the heirloom, and 1 more for either breaking or leader kill, or one of those, so that you could theoretically draw even if you didn't have the objective, just to try and make things a little bit more fair. So that was an interesting tweak on the scenario. So game 1 then is my Survivors of Lake Town. against Mordor. He was a lovely chap, and he had the Witch King, Gorbag, Kardush, and Goroth. A fairly similar Mordor list to mine, only he had no Black Númenóreans. He just had that horde of brutal Morannons. And turn 2, he picked up the relic. And to be honest, I just assumed it was game over already. I didn't really have any way of smashing through his force. And I just, all ability left me. I ended up running away, shooting. I don't know what was going on. He was a top sport, so he did hide the relic behind a bush, but midfield. While the rest of his army chased mine down, and we were joking about the fact that he had the objective and he was chasing me. And it was great fun. It was that fun, to be honest, that I didn't really take any photos other than sort of the final one, which was, again, very early on when he's got this objective. He's at the sort of the halfway point at this point. And it was quite a bizarre game. When we finally did get into the fighting, turn, I don't know, probably 8 by the time he'd finally caught me, his Witch King went into Bard for a laugh, lost, and got one shot by Bard. So he was still in the lead, but at least it was a bit of a moral victory. The Witch King just bounced off Bard and died. The lines then clashed, and the forces were fighting while Legolas and a couple of archers ran off to try and get the objective carrier. And it all came down to the very final turn, where Legolas couldn't see the objective carrier, so the previous turn he'd move round to be able to see him round the bush. And instead of hiding with him, he decided to charge me. He pointed out that he could just hide, but he decided it would be more fun to charge Legolas. And Legolas killed him and took the objective. So, from a bizarre point, I actually won this game 7-2. Or in fact, yes, 7-2, because I had the relic in my possession and I'd killed his leader. Neither of us were broken. We were very even on kills. We were about 20 apiece. This game definitely should not have been my win. I played it very badly. I just everything about it went badly, aside from Bard killing the Witch King, which was quite fun. But he was a sportsman and gave me the win, basically, by doing what was fun rather than what was sensible. So this was a win to me, but definitely should have gone to him. The next game was retrieval. So we alternated forces, and now I was using my evil force, and I was against another great chap who was using dwarves. It was, I'm not actually sure what it was. It was certainly Iron Hills with Dane, but he also had young Thorin and young Dwalin as well. There was no army bonus in there, so it must have been some form of alliance. I'm not 100% sure. It was just terrifyingly brutal with strength 4, defense 8 dwarves in the shield wall. But at least retrieval, we're trying to get each other's flag, basically. It's capture the flag. I deployed on the halfway line. He deployed quite a lot further back. 2 sort of choke points to try and fight nearer his objective, while a goat ran round the edge. This photo here is after the first sort of is the first turn of engagement. There were a couple of turns of kind of shooting and posturing. This is when we went in. The entrance to that sort of little Barrow-White cave that you can see, there's a load of my guys, including Gorbag, and a hole. Well, that hole used to have young Dwalin in it. I compelled him forward and jumped on him with, I think I had 11 guys and Gorbag. He obviously couldn't strike because he had been compelled, and he got torn apart. The Witch King then flew off to get a hurl. The hurl
annoyingly, because of the strength of the dwarves, and I'd mismeasured, I actually couldn't hurl into Dane on Big Pig, but he lost his mount to something else at some point, so it wasn't the end of the world. This was a brutal first turn. Between the mouth transfixing Dane and Thorin, as well as the compels and transfixes from the Witch King, his heroes were really kept out of this game, and losing young Dwalin so early on was brutal. This next photo is possibly even just the next turn. The mouth has gone into combat. He's got no will left, I don't think, at this point, because he's been abusing various heroes. The Witch King's gone back in again. This time his hurl is much closer. I think this is where he's going to take Big Pig off. You can see at the top as well, Gorbag and a lot of his friends have run up. They are going for the objective, which is just behind that Barrow-White's hill. And on the top right, there's a couple of my guys have managed to charge into his goat, so that I can just stop him from running around and getting my objective. This is a few turns on. It's a bit clearer. As you can see, Thorin didn't manage to get into combat. This is either one of those turns he failed a courage test, or he was transfixed, some reason why he's not in there. The Witch King's up at the top. Gorbag and co are trying valiantly to break through, and you can't see it here, but over on the other side, the Goat Rider was brought down by the 3 that I'd sent to go for him. I was very much going for the objective, but I thought I might have overreached a little bit, as I've got a lot of guys going for the objective, but here he has a lot of power. I've failed loads of courage tests. My courage was appalling with my courage 5 Black Numenorians with the army bonus. None of them could charge Dane, except for that one tracker. However, as you can see, he then pulled back and charged his guys away from my line, but towards the Witch King to trap him, which was even more scary. Fortunately for me, though, all of the priorities, all of the heroic move roll-offs, they went to me. His might was really hurt by losing Dwalin before he could do anything, and a lot of might went on trying to resist things and various things. He was in a bad way, so I managed to keep control. The Black Numenorian with the Loonband hat, he managed to pick up the objective right on the last turn. The Witch King decided he wasn't going to mess around, and he legged it top left, and that final turn he ran off, but not before getting a cheeky transfix off on someone. He really did play this scenario well, my opponent, but the magic and the mobility in my force, he didn't really have much of an answer for, and that really hurt. So this ended up being a 6-0 win to me. Being able to pick up that objective right at the end was huge. I was playing quite reckless in this game because I figured a 0-0 draw was boring. I forgot that actually Dane had been wounded by Scrubs really early on. He took a wound and he failed all 3 fate, and it actually went through. I'd ignored trying to kill Dane because I figured I'm never going to break through that defense 8 or 9 or whatever he is. Forgot he'd even been wounded. So I'd gone quite reckless. The Witch King was getting stuck in. This was the first time he'd ever not been in combat. But ultimately it paid off, and it was a 6-0 major win. This tournament's using a major, minor, win and loss scoring system. The previous game was a major as well, because I got the relic at the end, due to his sportsmanship, and this time because I'd picked up his relic, and that got me the major win. So this was the second major win of the day. The next game that I played was against someone that I've met before, one of the Scottish lads. So it was great fun to see him again and play him again. It's a real nice laid-back atmosphere for this game, and it was Clash by Moonlight. I managed to be lucky enough to have my Survivors of Lake Town with their 14 bows, Bard's Repeater crossbow, Legolas. This should have been over before it even started. And it really, really wasn't. Although at the same time, it kind of was. We both moved forward. I moved full forward in the first turn so that we were just out of 12 away, because you can only shoot up to 12 inches away in Clash by Moonlight, but you do get +1 to wound. So on my bows, I was excited. In the next turn, when I finally got shooting, nothing happened. Arrows just bounced off. I was doing my retreat walk. Nothing hit for 2, 3, 4 turns, except on Kamul, who went down to 0 fate, 1 wound. It wasn't Legolas. Legolas was completely useless all game. He rolled a 5 to hit and a 2 to wound every single time. And that is not a joke. That is even to the point where we were calling it and just uncontrollably laughing every time he bottled it and rolled that 2 to wound. It was hilarious, but really also quite irritating that Legolas was so useless. However, Legolas, for most of those shots, wasn't going after Kamul, because Kamul decided to charge. He went in behind my line to avoid getting shot. He could have either run away or he could have committed. He committed. I had Legolas and Bard on him. I won the roll-off and killed him. And so at this point, I am 5-0 up, because I've killed one more hero than him and his leader is dead. So I'm 5-0 up. So I just need to not lose heroes and not lose, and I'll win. So as much as it wasn't over before it began from shooting, it was to some extent, because his leader was dead. That's why in this picture, maybe on turn 2 or 3, there's carnage and no Kamul, because he is in fact dead. Then for the next 4 turns, every survivor died. It was brutal. This is actually a shot of the final turn, because it was a really, really fun game, so I wasn't really taking that many photos. I kind of forgot. All of my heroes were on the right-hand side. Legolas had been boxed out and did nothing all game until about the final turn. I did manage to kill Gorbag and the Mouth of Sauron, but the rest of his army just annihilated me. I should point out that his list was Kamul, his leader. He also had Amda, not his leader, so free to wreck face. I managed to box him out for quite a while, but when he finally got in, he was brutal. Although he'd lost his horse to a random lucky arrow. Then he had the Mouth and he had Gorbag. At one point, I had killed Kamul and 1 orc and had lost 25 survivors of Lake Town, breaking me. It was just absolute brutality. So I broke, at which point I gave up 5 victory points for being broken and not broken. I could have played for time and messed around and whatever, and I would have won 5-0. But it's not the way I want to play, so I didn't do that. And to be honest, in the end, I think I broke with a good 40 minutes to go. I'd have just had to cheat basically to do that, and it's just not the way I want to play. So I broke. It was 5-5 at this point for VPs. All my heroes have run. You can see the kids and Alfred. Gandalf's gone back. Even Bard on the final turn ran off, because if he took even a wound, then I would have lost rather than the draw. The captain had run away as well. I can't even see him in this picture, but he's run off safe somewhere. No one can quite get to him. In the final fight, though, the final turn, we'd gone to time, so this was definitely the final turn. Legolas went in on Amda. And that's because if Amda went down, then I would have killed all of his heroes. There'd have been a huge swing. It would have been something like 9-3 or whatever, because I'd have killed all of his heroes and his leader. Even though I was broken, I would still have won. Amda, however, still had might, which I forgot about. I forgot he had 1 point of might. He struck up, although it didn't matter because Legolas rolled like a potato. He'd been useless all game and he was useless here. But it was a long shot, it was a Hail Mary, but it was worth a go. And also, because I had killed 3 heroes, even if Legolas died, it wouldn't have stopped the 5-5 draw. As it was, Amda couldn't even wound Legolas's horse, let alone Legolas. So it ended as a 5-5 draw. It was a really, really fun game. And we had a good chat. We had a lot of fun. And a 5-5 draw, ending out the first day at 2 major wins and a draw was not too bad, really. It saw me towards the sort of top maybe 15, and it was a good first day. The next game, game 4 on the following day, I was actually up on table 2. I'd been bumped up a little bit because of the good versus evil shenanigans, so that no one was playing good versus good. So I was pumped up a little bit, but to be on table 2 was a massive surprise. It did pit me against someone who was playing for sort of top of the league, so I was a little bit worried here. We were playing Recon on this gorgeous Moria style board with the hordes of gold, which we declared any gold was just impassable terrain, just to make life easier. Most of my force came on early. I did have to spend a point of might on someone, possibly Gorbag or something like that, to get him on. But most of mine came on early. A lot of his took a long time because he had Shire and Elves. So a lot of his Shire heroes only had 1 point of might. They were rolling 1s, 2s. They took a long time to come on. So the fighting took place at least past the halfway mark, if not sort of a third of the board into his third. And as you can see in this picture, I've got a nice wide line across most of the battlefield. His force is spread front to back rather than left to right because of the deployment. I've got everything going for me, and you can see as well the banner, and behind that is Aragorn, who was mounted. He has been dismounted because I managed to compel and hurl heroic combat. At this point, things were going really well. I was ready to go either flank or even just straight through the middle. I was in a really strong position at this point. This is the next turn also. Just up at the top, can't quite see. There is the Witch King and the Mouth of Sauron. You can just about make out the Mouth of Sauron's base. They're going off. They're going to get off the board nice and easily. You can see the tape measure on the top of the photo as well. He's moving Merry and Fam and Maggot's 3 dogs. They're coming down. They're going to try and run the right flank. I've got loads of guys there. I've seen exactly what he's doing. They're never getting off. This is in the bag. This, however, is 2 turns later. I knew exactly what he was doing with Merry and his 3 dogs, and I just did nothing about it. The guys I had there dawdled. I even knew that he would be able to heroic move. I didn't put any might there. Just there was a lot going on in the game. And even though I recognised the threat and knew I could stop it, I just didn't. And so Merry and the 3 dogs are running towards the end. The Witch King got surrounded by about 5 or 6 guys that all passed courage tests. So he couldn't heroic combat off the board. Fortunately, he won the fight. He had to strike to do it because there were those... the pikemen that Lothlorien have at fight 6, he fortunately won the fight even on a 5 high against something crazy like 7 or 8 dice with banner reroll. Won the fight, barged, so that he got into the corner further away than anyone could move to get to him. So he did get off. The Mouth of Sauron did not. He got annihilated by Aragorn and 100 guys. But I did get the Witch King off. Unfortunately, the dogs and Merry that I'd been so confident at stopping also got off. I chased down and killed one of the dogs with a Warg Rider. A couple of guys joined the fight. I even got Merry down to 1 wound, no fate. But in the very final moments of the game, Merry touched the back wall, which we did actually get a TO ruling on, because I've heard it either way, whether you've got to fully be off the board or just touch the edge of the board. It was ruled that it was just touch the edge of the board. I wasn't that fussed by that, to be honest. And so Merry got off. All that meant was that instead of winning, he really won. He won by more. There was that final moment with priority at the end. I'd managed to smash through the middle. He was nearly broken, actually. Nearly managed to break him. I'd got a couple of guys towards the back of the board. It all came down to a final priority roll, and I lost the priority, which also sealed the deal and lost me the game. However, to be honest, I deserved to lose the game, because I'd foreseen him coming down that flank, done nothing about it. It was definitely not my game to win, and it went to him. It was a 7-0 major loss. It was unlucky, really. In terms of the actual fighting, I'd minced through his army. I'd managed to get the Witch King off. It was just really badly played by me, and so that was a 7-0 major loss. But then we shared a pizza. And and as with all these things, it's more about having fun than winning. And so we shared a pizza, and we had a good chat. The pizza was a Pizza Hut pizza provided by the tournament, which was really, really kind of them. They provided lunch both days, so a big shout out to them. Really, really top notch. So we then went into the 5th game of the week, the weekend, the second game on the Sunday. I was against the fall, not the fall of the necromancer, the necromancer legendary legion, the evil of the new necromancer legions, and was bricking it because we were doing Lords of Battle. Each wound you do is a tick in the tally box. I've got billions of very, very pants guys. He has some heroes. This is going to be brutal. So I deployed the majority of my force on the right-hand side, with just a couple on the left, captain and a few guys, just to try and force him to the right-hand side, which he did. I then advanced forward into bow range in the first turn and started shooting. And then for the next 6 turns, just backed off and shot and tried to just kite him as far as I could. The first volley of shooting was quite effective. I killed 2, then realised they can teleport forward when they die. So I quickly changed my tactic to only shoot ones at the back and to shoot the necromancer. This kept him at bay and got me a couple of wounds. I don't think we even got into combat for the first hour. I was on a tally of 4 or 5. He was on 0. And then the lines clashed. He managed to get a couple of them, the Lingering Shadow and Kamal and one other, into combat. They all won their combats and killed. And it was pretty nasty. So I was thinking that this is going to go very badly. On the positive, on the left-hand side, you can still see in this photo, even though this is from earlier than we're talking, the 2 on the left, they didn't make it into combat until about half an hour to go. The captain and his band had retreated all that way, shooting them. They never killed them, but they kept 150 points at bay, being about 50 themselves. But in terms of combats, it's very, very painful. The main thing that kept me in this game was a heroic combat that I managed to get off, which was Gandalf and Bard and Friend, who managed to heroic combat off one of the wraiths into the big man himself, into the necromancer. So I managed to charge into him with 2 fairly decent heroes. He was trapped. We debated whether he'd be trapped against those rocks, but then I managed to get the 3-point trap anyway, just so that it wasn't going to come down to something that was a bit dubious and we weren't quite sure on. Managed to get a 3-point trap. And over the next probably 4 turns, just whittled him away. Every couple of wounds, he can use his 25 will as fates. He had most of it left. He'd not been able to cast many spells. And just whittled him away and eventually managed to kill him. Now, during this time, the wraiths had got fully stuck in and had just rolled 1s and 2s. They were always surrounded and trapped. Legolas was on a rampage, winning every fight. He always had the charge. He was knocking them down, slaughtering them with his elven blade. Over the course of the game, I lost 4 models. He just couldn't win fights. Losing the necromancer then meant that he wasn't coming back on his resurrects very easily, and eventually he was just beaten down. Most of them did still keep coming back. I think he only lost 2 or 3 that died forever. If you're not familiar with them, when they die, which they do quite a lot, they come back. They come back on the role of a 2+ if the necromancer's around, or a 3+ normally, and the elven made weapons increase that, so either 3 or a 4 depending on whether the necromancer's there. Now Gandalf and Legolas both had elven made weapons, and they were both killing like crazy at the end. My tally was I think I was well into the high numbers. I got 30. And he got 7 in the end because he did some damage to my captain. And it was a massacre because he just couldn't roll high. It wasn't really his fault. It was also hampered by he was quite a new player. There were a few things he missed, like charging into heroes on horses instead of other guys and those kind of things, that I waited until afterwards to point out because I'm a terrible human being and wanted to win. But we had a good chat afterwards and kind of went through it, and he was grateful to be back down on the lower tables. He said he wasn't wanting to play on higher tables. It was a really good game. He was definitely let down by the dice, and also knowing the game with heroic combats and those kind of things. It's something that you learn, and tournaments are the kind of places where you learn it. So having secured a 9-1 major win in that 5th game, the final game was announced, and I was against the vanquishers of the necromancer. Fitting to have done the evil necromancer list and then the good one, but I was just filled with fear and dread. So the vanquishers of the necromancer, they're those 5 indestructible wizards with all those buffs you've all seen on the internet, how everybody hates them because they're the worst thing in the world to play against, and it's an awful game. Well, the only saving grace is at least we're playing an objective scenario. It's breakthrough. So this is it's halfway through turn 1. He had priority, so I called a heroic move with Grishnak because I just saw one possible chance, which was to go all in, and this was how I did it. So Grishnak went in. He didn't try and charge because they're all scary Marys. Except actually the wizards weren't at this point because they'd not cast their spells yet. But I didn't want to take any chances. Grishnak moved up, and then everyone surrounded them and pinned them in place, leaving that gap at the back. Now, one of the worst things about this legion is that they can cast while in combat. So it's now his turn, and he's casting everything. All his knockdown spells, he's got Wrath of Brunnen and whatever the other one is, that whatever the other hero can do, they're both resisted. One by Gorbag, one by Grishnak. So things are okay at this point. And then the Witch King resists everything. At one point, he resisted, I think, a sorcerer's blast or one of the many transfixes, who knows what it was, with 3 natural 6s. So it didn't even cost him any will. He resisted some with very few will, some with a couple. He barely spent anything. It was ridiculous how in my favour it went. And ultimately, it led to this. So this is still the first turn. He's fully surrounded. And now the Witch King comes round the back into Radagast. He can't get knocked off his mount or anything like that. So for this one turn, we have a free Witch King ready to kill. And he wants blood. So I strike up. I've gone into Radagast, the healer. I'm ready to kill him. And then Radagast calls a heroic defense, which I forgot he had. This is a nightmare. Radagast is the healer. If he dies, then I'm in a much better position. And he calls a heroic defense. So anything is going to be 6s to wound. I'm going to need, realistically to be safe, 6 6s. It's just never going to happen. So I barged into Gandalf and was so lucky. He's defense 5, strength 6 on the beast, 8 dice, needing 4s. One-shot Gandalf. 6 wounds, Gandalf is dead. At the end of turn 1, he's down to 4 models. And it's just such a huge blow that things, fingers crossed, aren't going to be as bleak as we were expecting. And then things get bleak. This is the next turn. And I think he had priority or lost or called a heroic move. Either way, he's casting spells. And it is savage. The Witch King, who resisted well the previous turn and killed Gandalf, gets blasted off his mount. He's absolutely ripped a new one. Dies very, very quickly. I think even turn 2, I think, was when he died. I'd resisted a lot. I was left with just a couple of will. I decided to allow, because at this point I got no might as well. I had to allow a banish through from the Lady of Light. Decided I wouldn't try and resist it. I'd need a 6 with no might. So I let it go through, figuring I'll stop it with a fate. It's fine. Failed all 3, and the Witch King's gone. The next few turns are savage. Gorbag and Grishnak have no will, so they are unable to resist everything. And most of my guys are getting knocked to the floor by Sorcerer's Blast, Wrath of Brunnen, who knows. The saving grace is that the Mouth of Sauron once will cast Transfix, and every single turn it went off, and every single turn Elrond failed to resist. Poor Elrond did very, very little in those opening turns. The other wizards, however, cut stuff down, knocking everything over, until, amazingly, Galadriel died. She lost a fight, even with her 3 attacks, with her Lord of the West sort of reroll thing that Elrond was giving her. She lost the fight and just got one shot. Loads of guys on her. She took loads and loads of wounds. Morannin's wounded on 4s. She just died outright. Now, this was a really, really intense game. It was fun, but it was mind-blowing. All the spells and things, and a lot of things to think about, so it was really blowing my mind. I didn't take many photos. Saruman, Radagast, and Elrond were constantly surrounded because I was failing no courage tests. I started to lose my courage 5 with the army bonus Númenóreans, but at this point Galadriel with a -1 died. So now my orcs were courage 3, they were passing, and they were getting in as well. And one particular turn, Saruman lost the fight. And then Saruman died, which was huge because now they're no longer getting their rerolls. He was a big buff for them, and now he is dead. And he's the leader as well. And the best bit of his death is 2 of his wounds were self-inflicted. He lost all his fate and 2 wounds because he was blasting into his own combat, which was fantastic for knocking all the guys over, and he killed quite a lot doing it. But he was getting wounded on 5s, and both of the time, I think he did it 3 times. Twice he wounded himself on a 5, and that really, really hurt him. And then when he lost that fight and died, that was huge. This also broke the vanquishers, which I never thought was going to be possible. Elrond had failed a courage test earlier on double 1s with no will. Sadly, it was only to charge. He never failed to run away. But at this point, it was now just a matter of time. While all this fighting's been going on, I have all 4 of the objectives. I've got quite a lot of guys on them. There's no way now with these 2 he's going to be able to do it. He was moving towards the final objective, the one that got me 4. But in the end, he just couldn't do it, and he was quartered. I believe, I've not actually got a photo of the very end, but I believe Radagast failed to cast his knockdown spell. He was no longer terrifying at this point. He'd spent his last will trying to get something off. He got trapped and butchered, and the game ended. There wasn't much left in terms of time. I broke in that final turn, so he did get some victory points. It was, in the end, a 12-2 major win to Mordor, having vanquished the Vanquishers. And after this game, when we'd shook hands, he then asked me, what was it like playing against the Vanquishers? Because we've all seen on the internet that they're the worst thing in the world to play against. And my honest answer was terrifying, but also pretty fun. It was a really, really good game. If it hadn't been objective-based and it had been purely about killing, it would have been maybe a different story, but equally, I quartered them. They're not indestructible. And it was really fun. There's a lot to think about. But as long as you've got some brave guys, my front line was Courage 5. There's still a lot you can do. And it was a really fun game. I'm sure there are situations where it wouldn't be. But for this game, the one time that I have played this Legion, it was fun. This game was against Ed Ball. And shout out to him. He requested that I tell the whole internet that it's not that bad playing against the Vanquishers and that you can still have a fun game. So there you go, Ed. I've told the whole internet, or at least the few people that watch this video. And so that was the final game. It was a really great end to a really great tournament. It actually pushed me up to 6th place, which was a very pleasant surprise. I was not really expecting to do that well. And a moral victory. The game that I lost was against the chap that ultimately I believe came 3rd. So I was quite happy with that. And overall, the tournament was absolutely fantastic. The people, the venue, really, really good. Cannot recommend enough going to this tournament. I'll definitely be trying to get a ticket for the next one. A great way to end the gaming year and just a fantastic weekend. So that's everything from me. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully I'll see you at a tournament in the new year.